I'm Pete Monfre. Let's get into the B2B marketing mindset, shall we? Just under the wire at 11 o'clock every Thursday. Hey, listen, you're going to want to pay attention to today's podcast because we're going to spill our guts and reveal the two magic bullets that all but ensure growth and profitability for B2B companies. But before you get too excited, let me introduce my co-host, Bill Lowell, who is broadcasting from deep underground in an undisclosed Arctic location. Hey, Bill, how's it going?
I'm deep down in the bunker, so you may have to yell at me a little bit louder so I can hear you then.
Under the ice, in the ice tunnels.
Yeah. We've actually had beautiful weather here. It's 60 degrees today, you know?
That's fantastic. I mostly just tease. Of course, I lived in Wisconsin for a really long time, and but I also lived in Wyoming, where they have this thing where one day it's 10 below zero, and the next day it's 65, and
Whoa,
so it snows like nuts, and then it melts the next day.
Yeah.
It's a crazy weather environment.
And you're in Austin, Texas now for the last, 25 years?
Not that long. 2006, I believe we came to
there you go.
beautiful Austin, Texas. And we usually have our Austin cam up, but today is the day of technical problems. You mentioned the cell phones being out across the country.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I'll have to look into that. We definitely were having a bunch of tech problems. We didn't think we'd be able to run on time, but what the heck? Hopefully it's working. And I heard a rumor, though, that you have owned and run a B2B company for a few decades.
Yeah,
Why am I always last to know with this stuff?
I probably need somebody good at marketing or public relations to get the word out. That's why no one knows. But that's been the marketing strategy, is just don't tell anybody,
That's a good one. That's a good one. Well, I love this idea of silver bullets because I think people don't actually ever say, hey, tell me the silver bullet. But oftentimes it's pretty clear that is what they're looking for. What's that one thing or those two things that I should do? And I've always said there isn't any.
Yeah.
But I'm going to reveal them now today.
Ooh.
So
Curly from City Slickers would be proud of you, right?
That's
one
right.
Thing you're going to tell
That's
them.
right.
But there's two things.
But there's two. So it's twice as better as that. Twice as better. So one thing before we start real quick, so these are the two things that B2B companies need to do to be successful. We'll break them down a little bit. I think they're obvious, but for some reason, these sort of fundamental things seem lost on people. But I wanted to tell you that you can subscribe on your favorite platform. That could be iHeartRadio or Spotify or Amazon or Apple Podcasts, wherever you would like. But also head over to b2bmarketingmindset.com. You're going to find a lot more content, and very soon we're going to be launching a whole bunch of free B2B marketing courses, so you can sign up there and stay in the loop, so you get the announcements of the courses. That's pretty cool, huh?
That's great. Yeah.
Worth the effort, I would say. And so, but you can also listen to us in audio form everywhere fine podcasts are consumed. So, full disclosure, Bill and I have, started and owned B2B companies for decades. We've known each other for that long. We have, but I think more importantly, we have like our own personal experiences, very personal, like struggling with a lot of the same things our clients struggle with, our own confirmation bias, things that we believe in our heads that might not really be true. We suffer from it, I think. Do you have trouble seeing your business because you're so close to it?
No, I see it, but I think maybe in the earlier days we did, but no, I feel pretty confident about it. But it's only because we've been preaching stuff so long that if you don't listen to it for yourself, you're in trouble.
Yeah, and I think I don't sometimes. I do think that I'm too close to it, and I do bring in help, and I've brought in marketing people, and I've gotten sales training, and but I guess you're right. As I get older, I'll ask people things, hey, am I crazy on this? No, you got it. You're seeing it, but I still question everything. But
that's a good thing. And even like you said, to bring in outside experts or go to a seminar or something, those are always positive things. I mean, even if you learn one thing, I think that that's a good thing. Or you meet one other person, I think that that's good. So
Well, one reason that we can do our jobs and that we're valuable to clients and all this is not just because we've run our own B2B companies, but we've got experience with literally, I mean, this is hard for people to grasp. Hundreds and hundreds, unless you're a consultant, right? You'll get it right
yeah,
away. But hundreds of B2B companies, and most of them, it's all about driving more opportunities, leads, better leads, closing more deals, all about growth.
yeah.
But they're usually missing these fundamental silver bullets. I mean, they're sometimes they're doing one, but they're not doing the other, or maybe they are familiar with these ideas. These are not obscure ideas. You'll see in a minute. But maybe they're not executing them very well. So we'll talk a little bit about that and, I guess what we've learned in
Yeah,
all those
and
engagements.
sometimes I think it's like you just mentioned earlier, Pete. Sometimes, you know, it's hard if you're in marketing or if you're in this business, it's it's hard sometimes to take your own advice or to do the things because you're just everybody gets so busy. So what is that
Well,
about the cobbler's shoes? You know what I mean? It's the same kind of
it,
story.
it's true. It's really true, and it's also so. Before we jump into the titles in this, in each, we usually do 5 points on the show. Five, not five, five. And but before we jump into that, I think that's a really important idea. We're pretty small companies at the end of the day. A lot of our clients are much much bigger than us, and they have more resources, and they can do more things. If anything, I think because of the types of business we're in, we really have to have a tight ship because we don't have the resources of say a $50 million company. So, but let's talk about it. The first one is silver bullet number one: learn modern sales method. I don't know if that is clear to everybody what I mean by that, but
Why
so
don't you
many.
tell us?
Well, I think I will.
Okay, good.
So many organizations are selling based on principles in the fifth, that come from the 50s. Maybe it's Zig Ziglar, maybe it's it's the it's where the salesperson is at the mercy of the prospect. Whatever the prospect asks, the salesperson agrees. Let me get that quote for you as soon as possible. Hey, sure, you could call me at 9 o'clock. Would I follow up with you in 3 weeks? Absolutely, sir. And it does work. This is one of the things about traditional selling, where you're just beating the pavement and you're pounding down the doors and you're pitching everybody. These are the emails that you get that are like, "Hi, my name is blah blah, and here are the blah blah 10 things we do." I mean, a very traditional way. There's a better way. I personally, over the years, you've seen things like spin selling, selling to the C-suite, consultative selling, right? They're going in the right direction. They're getting more modern there. But for me, Sandler Sales pulled it together for me. So Sandler Sales Systems, I think they're called. They're in every city. It's a huge company. Started by David Sandler. I'm not affiliated with them, by the way. But I have to say, I was a traditional sales guy, built a company, so it does work. The problem is, it's brutal. My life was ugly. I was just controlled by the market, and I didn't have my own process, so I was defaulting to the buyer's process. And I've got some videos on that. We'll try to post some links. Maybe somebody can find those videos and post links in the comments. But the traditional versus the modern sales method. So that's my silver bullet one, is learn how to sell the way that B2B companies sell in 2024.
And I think one of the big parts of that, and we had this on our big forum that we ran with all those unique and wonderful people that were
That
involved in
panel.
that, where it's like times have changed. I mean, just like we learned, the people want more self-service now, so they want more, they want more digital help instead of the one-on-one that used to be there. Although the one-on-one's still important to some extent. So I think the real important message is, and that's the thing that I go with is like, how does your prospects, customers, markets, how do they want to meet you, buy from you, that kind of good stuff. So if you don't know that and you're still, you're still applying the old traditional methods, it may not work for everybody, but it might work for some. So I think, you need to know what are people's preferences. And I think that that's going to be really important. And we've talked about this before, and there's a lot of things like with people where they'll give the disc profile or they'll try to find out the personality, profiles of each of their customers. I think that that's sometimes helpful too, but
Or they're say,
I
or the
go back.
disc, the profiles of the personality profiles of salespeople, and then you can
Yeah.
help manage them better. But I look at it like Sandler taught me how to allow people to buy
Yes,
and not be trying to sell something.
right.
And there's a subtle difference, but it's too much to go into for today. But if
Yeah,
you're doing a ton of following up and you're chasing and you're getting ghosted all the time, you just think it's part of sales, right? You're making cold calls and you're pitching your wares, pitch your wares, pitch your wares. Let me tell you how I'm going to make your life better. I'm going to solve all your problems, Bill. You know, if you're not asking questions 80% of the time in the interaction with a prospect, you're probably not using a modern sales method, right? If you're not
I
there to solve a problem, you're there to hawk goods or services, you're probably not selling in a modern process. If you're curious
no,
about this, ping me. I love talking about it.
yeah. I wanted to mention a couple of things though. One, early in my career, I remember getting disgusted with people because they would say, "You're a really good salesperson," and I would get mad because I think I've got a graduate degree. I'm in consulting. I am not in consult, and I would get really, really upset. And then one day, my dad sat me down and he said, "You know what? Some of the most wealthy people, some of the most successful people, they're all salespeople. Whether they're in sales or not, everybody's in sales." And that kind of turned the light on for me. And it's like, that's a really good point. So it doesn't matter if you're in engineering or if you're the CEO of a company or if you're in market, everybody is really or should be in sales. I mean, you're in sales whether you know it or not. So you
Yeah,
better get good at it
right.
because, and then the second thing that I learned, which, because we keep on referring to Ed Schwarzkopf, but they used to, in my early days in the consulting, I would always ask, Ed, what do we do? What do we do? And he'd always say, we're going to just go and give them a good listening to. And to me, those are
That's
magical
it.
words because,
That's it.
he said, if you give them a good listening to, they're going to tell you all their problems or their issues or what's bothering them, and then you can maybe solve it or refer them to somebody.
Absolutely. And hey, I always thought you were a good salesperson, even 30 years ago. I mean, you had the people skills. But I think that, if we wanted to be broader, and we'll jump to the next topic here, but
Yeah,
a lot of companies really don't have a sales methodology. They really just they're not following any methodology. They haven't developed their own. They're just purely reactive to buyers, and it's something to think about. But one of the silver bullets is learn how to sell. Make
yeah,
sure that you have the skills. And keep in mind, buyers, there are a lot of buyers out there that are literally educated in buying. They have a process, let me tell you.
right.
And other people that aren't specifically trained in buying, they have a process too. It's subconscious, and we all do it. But if you are going into that lion's den and you don't have any specific process or methodology to follow, you're going to be at a disadvantage in that buyer-seller dance, right? So these are all things I learned, and thank God for David Sandler. If you hate
This would be a
Sandler
fun.
sales,
This would be a yeah,
let me know that too.
this would be a fun topic just in itself sometimes because there's so many things that I've learned over the years, and I'm sure that you have too as well. It just is a fascinating topic. I just think it
Yeah, well,
is.
we'll have Frank Gustafsson from Sandler. We're gonna have
Oh, there
him
you
as a
go.
guest. I think he is scheduled.
Good,
And so let's jump into silver bullet number 2.
cool.
Develop a marketing plan. These
You don't need that.
these
That's
are
a bunch of hogwash.
mysterious. How do we come up with these secret things?
No, that's just a dumb idea that will never work.
It's never gonna work.
Exactly. Forget it. We want to wing it. We don't need to have any kind of plan in place.
And listen, today's marketplace, in terms of tools and all the stuff that goes on, it's simple. You don't need a plan for that. You just try stuff, right? Like just
Exactly.
give it a shot, man. Write it some
Spend all that
checks.
money. Spend all that money that you don't want to spend or don't have. And then just you'll get it right eventually.
But then I get so sad. I
Yeah.
get so sad at the end of the year when I just can't figure out if I got a return on my marketing investment. I'm just bummed. Or maybe I know I lost my but isn't that part of it though? Isn't that why the our CPA has a line in our P&L and it's an expense category called marketing? Okay, that's enough of that.
Exactly. We don't want to talk about that marketing
Listen,
subject.
if you think marketing's an expense, in other words, it's something that you just put money into because you're supposed to, you hope it works, but it's an expense, then you're doing it wrong, okay? It should be an investment. Every dollar you put into marketing, you should be able to get 3, 4, 5, I don't know how many dollars back, but more than one. And so this topic is so important because I think a lot of companies are selling in some way, shape, or form. And for many companies, it's working for them because I call it the slot machine theory. The way traditional sales works is it works just enough to keep you pulling the lever. But if you look at the actual cost of just, let's say you're only, there's a lot of companies that only sell. They don't really do marketing. They probably got a VP of sales and marketing who gets compensated on sales, so marketing doesn't really get done. But if they understood the sheer amount of cost it's taking, their cost of acquisition, they would be very unhappy. But then there are companies who maybe they're doing sales and marketing, but they're not executing one or both of them very well at all. And again, that's you got to do both of these things together, and you need to do them well. Both selling and marketing require a plan. Is that revolutionary? Is somebody out there like their mind is blown out? What?
Well, I think it's just like any other plan in business. You got to follow the plan because there are so many things that happen in the course of a business year that take you off course or distract you or get you where you're no longer focusing on what you need to do. And having the plan can bring you back. I mean, it can also help you if somebody else is trying to sell you something and they're really good. Again, go back to your plan. Does the plan support what these people are asking? So, I mean, there are just so many good reasons to do it. But how are you going to know if you're successful if you don't have that plan where you do a debrief at the end of the year? I mean, I could give you 100 things on this.
Well, what is a plan really? And Alex Nesbitt is a guy, look him up on LinkedIn, who really does a great job
Wasn't
delineating.
he on WKRP in Cincinnati?
No, he wasn't.
Oh, okay.
But hopefully he'll be on our podcast. But
Okay.
delineating strategy from planning, right? This we get people get that confused. But we're talking about a plan. So I always think of it. I agree with that entirely. I mean, I think it helps guide what you're doing. Plans should be flexible. By the way, you're going to probably have
Right.
to change it, right? Everybody has a plan until they
Definitely.
get punched in the face.
Yep.
But what it is, if we just break it down, is a decision-making process. But I always think of it more like if I'm going to build a complex structure of some kind, I'm going to probably have some sort of blueprint, right? Because there's too many pieces and parts to get them all to work together in a unified way. And if I'm doing sales well, I'm going to want to interface with my sales function so that it's working with that also. So you've got you don't have a bunch of silos, your website over here and you're doing social media over there and God only knows what you're doing out there. But they're all disconnected. The planning process by its nature allows you to manage complex activities like a system, but it also allows a team later on to implement the system, right? It's very different if it's a team of people trying to do marketing or if it's just one person or a bunch of people without a plan or whatever. There's all combinations of variables here, but I'm just wondering if there's somebody out there that's like, what is a plan? What is that? What do you mean?
Well,
I've
but I
never
think
heard of it.
I do think there's people have different definitions of what that plan consists of. So, I mean, so some people might be saying that, or some people might already be doing it, Pete, and they just didn't know that they were actually doing planning. I mean,
True,
so
very true.
yeah,
And we don't mean to, we don't want to sound like, hey, everybody's stupid but us, but these are just process kind of challenges that a lot of companies have in the
right,
way that they make decisions. And we're applying it to sales and marketing, but it could be anything. It could be the way that you plan your factory floor. I
exactly,
mean, it could be
exactly.
the way that you decide to structure your finance operation. You're probably going to have a plan of some kind, but for
You
some
know,
reason, marketing, especially smaller and mid-sized companies, they really just don't really have a decision-making process. They tend to do things one little piece at a time. It's very frustrating, and it turns into an expense because it can't work. This is why I wanted to talk about it. If you're struggling with marketing, you're not sure if you're getting a return, you're not growing the way you want, ask yourself, do you have a real marketing plan? Not a list of tasks or a spreadsheet of numbers,
mhm.
but did you go through a journey, a process with your team where you asked all the questions again? Even the ones you think you know the answers to, you asked them again, you did it in an organized way. You and let's talk about the steps, right?
I
Because
like
I
that.
think people will see where we're going with this, and maybe you have a plan, maybe you don't. Let's talk about the steps you could see if you have a plan or not.
I love it. I love it. I
And
think
by the
that's
way, there
great.
is kind of a format, the American Marketing Association. There are best practices and what's included in a plan. What are the sections? That can vary though depending on the circumstance. But there is a standard, just so you know. So this is not what we're talking about today. Isn't really a big secret. It's just that I somehow it's becoming a lost art. You start with a diagnostic or a situation review, right? Anytime you make any decision, what's the first thing you do? You assess, what are we trying to solve?
Yeah.
What are the circumstances? What's the situation? What are the outcomes we want? What are the goals, right? SMART goals, for example. Very
I would add a few others
go.
there. I mean, you mentioned manufacturing, but it doesn't matter too. I mean, you mentioned the goals part of it, and so the reason I'm saying that is what happens, and I see this a lot, and I'm sure you do as well, where somebody will come to you and say, "We want to grow by 20% next year, or in the next 3 years, we want to double our revenues, or whatever the case is." And I always, to me, that first assessment, like you were talking about, is yes, you want to find out the goals, objectives, and where they want to go, and all that kind of good stuff. But it's asking those tough questions too, because it's like, all right, you want to grow. Do you have the structures in place already now? That's why I talked about manufacturing. I mean, are you able to deliver what, let's say that we do double your sales. Are you able to deliver, or are we going to ruin your company because you can't deliver and you're going to be a customer service nightmare? You know what I mean?
Right.
So part of it is, asking the art of the possible. You know what I mean? Okay, so asking what is key, and I've got a ton more that I can say in this stage, but this stage is really important as far as I'm concerned.
Well, a typical marketing firm might do a few hours of discovery. Okay.
Yeah, which is
It's
sad.
it's not enough. And
No.
even if you're not using an external person or a firm or you have an internal department, you know, the way we do discovery anyway is we look at every part operationally of the business and we ask a lot of questions. And we ask questions that maybe sometimes I always like it when we ask a question that the reaction is that's a really obvious question. Yes,
Yeah.
it is. And I'm not going to assume anything. But, you know, what people like us do is we make this pain less painful. We compress the amount of time it takes to go through that systematically through the business. And what you're really looking for are gaps in when you're doing your initial diagnostic or situational review or discovery, whatever it is you want to call it. You're not looking for the things that you're certain of, but you still might ask those questions. You're really looking for the things that you're not certain of, or that maybe the information you have comes from a dubious source, right? From 25 years ago, you know. an old CEO that's no longer employed by the company who decided this thing that everybody's now believed for the last 25 years.
Exactly. I love that.
Maybe it's that, okay?
Yeah.
We would call that a gap or a critical question, right? So once you go through that process, and all we do as facilitators is we organize that for you and we make it so that it goes fast, and so you're not 7 months from now, you're still not assessing your situation. That happens all of the time, by the way. We can,
By the way, I think part of that's
we
the
don't let that
beginning
happen.
stages of what makes you unique or what makes you special or what makes you different. I know we're going to find it out as we go through this process, but as Mark Twain says, it's what we know that just ain't so. I mean, so sometimes companies will think they're unique in certain areas, and we
Right.
end up talking to the next step, and you find out that's not true at all.
Well,
So
right. And I just saw this very recently. The thing that made them different was service. Let me tell you
yeah,
something,
right,
service. Here's the thing. Every single company in that space says that service is the thing that makes them different. Okay?
exactly.
So you got to go deeper than that. But the way to get there is to go through a deliberate process of making decisions, which we are outlining for you right now. So that's step one. Ask all the questions, man. Ask
By the way,
them.
I just had one last week that I met with that was a prospect. They told me they have zero competition, that their work is so good that no one can compete with them. And I, where do you go with that? You know what I mean? I think the
I like
best
to.
thing in that is just to walk out the door because
I think so. I like to say, what about the competition of doing nothing? Did you think of that
exactly,
one?
yeah,
But I guarantee you there are. So what is competition? It's an option other than you.
that's exactly it. Yes, yeah,
So, well, who is your competition?
yeah,
But what you're going to end up with, if you do a good diagnostic situation discovery review, you're gonna end up with a long list of gaps in,
yeah.
and we call them critical questions here, but some people call them gaps. But they're people, processes, and information. That's what you're looking for. And sometimes it's a combination of those things, right? Like somebody's not following the process. That's a people and process problem. There's no process at all.
Yeah.
That's a process problem. Or you don't have good information. Maybe your information's outdated. Maybe it's company lore that somehow turned into fact over time, something like that. You're assuming you don't have any competition.
Right.
I would ask, could you tell me about the last competitive analysis that you did of the marketplace? And they'll be like,
Don't need one.
I don't need to do that. I've been in this business for 20 years, mister. Well,
You
listen,
don't.
dude, you were in diapers when I was, never mind. I'm not going to go there. All right. But
We're
I
moving
just,
on.
I just politely say, hey, man, you're probably right, brother. I'm going to put that in the assumptions pile, though. Okay. So a lot of times we have a really long list of questions, and honestly, too many questions. If you've heard the term targeted research, which I bet you have, since you own a marketing research firm, what are we talking about? We're talking about narrowing down the questions that we're going to
Right.
expend resources on to get answered. And let me tell you, it ain't
Exactly.
going to be all of your questions. It's going to be the ones that you designated the most critical questions. Sometimes there's
When
50, sometimes there's 30. But we usually start with 100 and 200 questions. So,
yeah.
we have a way to score those. The client can score, and we can prioritize those
So
questions, right? Critical
so
questions.
research is the next step. So is
It
what
is. Let's
we're
jump to it. So, what are we
okay.
researching? You got to have a pretty good sense of what data that you're looking for, and it's usually in the form of a question. I'll give you an example. What is the primary, what is the most important thing that prospects consider when choosing one, I'll use marketing firm like us, marketing firm over another? That's a really clear question,
Yeah.
and that can be answered with customer research. So usually the next step once we get those questions is customer and competitive research. And I'm turning that over to you.
Well, I'll talk about each of those in just a second, but typically what I like to do with my clients and one of the things that I've always taught all my staff members, when you think about research, it's actually really, really simple. All you have to do is there's three things to ask. The one question is, what do you want to know or what do you want to learn? The second thing is, who would be the best person that to be able to tell you that information, or where do you want to find that information? So,
Right.
like, from whom do you want to learn this information? And then the third thing is, what's the best medium in order to get to them? Whether that's one-on-one interview, phone, focus group, what's the best way that you can reach them? Once you get those three things answered, I think you can break it down into, and it usually does go customer, competitor, industry usually. But
Right.
I mean, those three questions I think make it really simple for any organization to go, oh, I get it now. I get what you're asking me.
A lot of product companies will say, look, we've done a raft of competitive research. We don't need to do it.
Right.
That's a different kind of research than what we're talking about. We're talking about research tailored. We're not going to be looking at software features and technology and prices.
Right.
And, it might be a superficial part of it, depending on if that's super important to the client. But we're really looking at how are your competitors executing their marketing? What are their
Mm-hmm.
messages? How are they positioning themselves?
Yes.
What methods are they using? I mean, do you have a large company in your field that maybe you don't compete with them directly because you're smaller, but let me tell you, are they likely to have invested a ton in research?
Right.
Right? You might find things that you can emulate. You might find
Yes.
things where they're super weak that you can out execute. There's so
Right.
many things. And of course, you do have to narrow it down because nobody has enough budget to answer every question imaginable. But you're talking you're talking about primary research. But tell me about secondary research where
Well,
there's no whom involved. Is there? I
right.
mean, am I getting that wrong?
Well, I think it could be. It could be the whom could be from some industry expert, and that could be a trade publication or association or something else that already has some data. But secondary research, as I'm sure everybody watching this knows, is just stuff that's already available. So maybe there's a study that's already been done. Maybe there's some industry analysis that's already been done. Maybe you've already got some expert interviews, but it's like, let's go out and find some of that. And that's actually really inexpensive and a nice way to be able to capture some really good data.
There
So
is
I
a
think,
ton of data out there,
yeah,
and coming up, we're going to have as a guest Tim Hayden from Brain Trust Partners, and he's going to be amazing when we're talking about data. But let me take just a minute. And next week we have Steve Harper from Ripple, the Ripple, which is it's a philosophy, it's a networking thing, it's an organization, it's a fraternity, but Steve started this many years ago, and he's just a great person, owns a number of companies, very savvy businessman, good marketer. It's going to be fun having Steve Harper on next
great,
Thursday. So,
great.
you know, I always try to do this program, and I don't want to assume people know what anything means, right? Because things are so convoluted now. I mean, I feel like we're in the post-truth era. And so, people might not know what secondary research means, but man, secondary research, wow, it is awesome. And Bill's company subscribes to databases that you don't subscribe to and don't have access to. There is a ton of data. This is when somebody says big data, usually that's what they're talking about is secondary research. So it's so important to do your research because otherwise you're going to base all your decisions on your own cognitive bias
You
or
got
your
it.
organization's biases, right?
Yep.
And you're going to be 95% right? Our clients know their
Mm,
business. Is it the percentage lower? I'm being
oh,
gracious.
I think you are being very kind today.
Well, I always think it's the 5% that you get wrong that really is what trips you up. Maybe you're
Well, exactly.
80% right and it's 20%, but most of the time, people know their
Yeah.
businesses pretty well. They're close. But COVID is one of the big game changers, right? Maybe you knew 90%, you were 95% right before COVID. COVID changed so many things, you're probably more like 70% right now if you're lucky. And so if you haven't done research in market research since COVID, the shutdown, I mean, look at what AI is doing, right? I mean,
I know.
you need to know what's going on out in the market. And so, reach out to Bill. He's your guy on that. But
Thank you.
so that's the next step. So what
Okay.
we did a discovery diagnostic
Hmm.
situation review. We
Right.
identified critical questions. We went out into the market and got answers to the questions. So now what do we have? We have information from internally that's got some bias in it,
Yeah.
but we have data now externally that we can check our assumptions and learn new things that no one thought of. My favorite part, your favorite part. We always learn something that we're like, holy
Yeah.
crap, you know. And this is where the magic happens. And what we're saying is if you go through this and have the discipline to do it, I'm going to just throw it out there. 100% of the time, you're going to see success in your marketing program. This is what we've seen over the years. Clients that follow this process, I have to say almost always, but honestly, I can't think of anybody who followed the process and executed really well that didn't get where they wanted to go. I can't think of a single one. Now, a lot of people just don't execute very well, or they say, oh, we're not going to do the research. We know our business.
Or they don't pay attention. This could be a whole nother show, but I've had some people where I brought them what I thought was some gold and they just decided to ignore it. And, so that's a whole nother story, like I said.
Yeah, there's so many variables, but some of the, if you have a good facilitator, we actually can control a lot of these things, and that's only if you listen to folks. And maybe there are people on your team that you need to listen to, but everybody needs to listen and let the data guide you. I think that's the big thing, because now that you have this huge pile of data that is now correlated and made sense of because you're going through a deliberate process, the strategy really emerges from the data. Like, this is a big misunderstanding, I think, about what marketing people do. Because I've had people say this to me. They're like, my tie's crooked, it's bothering me. They said, just tell us what we should do, man. Why don't you just tell us? Like, why do we have to go through all this pain, and time and effort? And when you just tell us, aren't you an expert in this, Bill? Just tell me what to do. Should we tell the audience the truth?
Yeah, tell them to do research.
Here's my truth.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you the truth here in 2 seconds, but I'm going to give you a little background. When I was younger, I might dance around that a little bit because I wasn't sure how to answer it. Well, of course I know, but listen. Here's the fact: is I don't know. All right, I don't know the answers for your company. Have I worked with 15 companies like yours? Of course. I've been doing this for a long time, but have I worked with a company exactly like yours, with your exact situation and your exact critical questions and your exact market situation? The fact is, I don't know the answers. It's not my job. My job is to know the questions and to interpret data to help you collaborate. And the answers you seek are in the data. And instead of just it. I always think of like sitting around a conference table and all the data's in the middle of the table, and people are just like, okay, yes, let's do that. Because one, your customers are going to tell you exactly what you need to know to succeed.
Right.
You just have to ask them.
And they'll be flattered and honored that you asked them to, by the way.
They're not always right. Everybody always talks about, was it Tim Cook or was it Steve Jobs who decided that Apple didn't need to listen? Customers don't know shit. We're going to do whatever we want. Hey, it worked out for Apple for one reason or another, but probably not because of that decision. Right. All right. Customers know a lot, and they know a lot that you don't know. And you can base strategic decisions on what a sample of customers. If 85% of the people agree that this one factor is how they choose one over another, maybe you should talk about that in your marketing, right? So build that strategy based on the research, not just on kind of lore and bias and all that good stuff. And then the last step in this onerous process, this process lost to time, this elusive process that makes the difference between whether you're flushing your money down the toilet or you're actually getting $4 back from every dollar you spend. You need to execute that plan, track it, and this is the part I think people get lost on. it's really marketing and sales, by the way, and almost everything in business. It's a game of continual improvement, is it not?
Hmm.
Do you ever just right out of the gate, just blow it out of the water? I mean, is that a realistic expectation for anyone?
I think the only time that that happens is when I listen to my wife. Otherwise, everything else needs research. So if I listen to her, I'm usually ready
You
to
can
make a good
count on
decision.
that.
Exactly. But
You
no,
know,
I don't think people can put it out of the water. But with regard to your market planning, I think that having that plan is really good. Scheduling and budgeting, and then like you talked about, how are we going to implement? Who's going to be responsible? I mean, those
roles
are
and
all important.
responsibilities, timing, scope,
Yes, yes,
measurement, KPIs,
yes.
and then don't have too many KPIs either. You won't be able to track it, right?
Right.
Unless you're Johnson and Johnson.
And by the way, you can put together your marketing plan by those objectives, those KPIs, or you can do it by your target audience, or you can do it by, the media that you're going. I mean, so lots of ways to put it together, but I think the key is get that plan down.
Well, and at the risk of self-promotion, I mean that's the stuff. This is where we really can help companies. It isn't just tell us the answers. It isn't just ask us the questions. It's like there's a lot of different methodologies based on. It could be based on your place in the market life cycle. Are you in an
Exactly.
emerging market or a declining or a mature market? It's going to be
Absolutely.
completely different strategies. If you're not if you're not an expert in this area, you're gonna do a lot better if you had some guidance or if you hired somebody internally. I don't care what you do. You don't have to hire us, but somebody there. There's a level of experience and training and repetition. But if you think about a plan, is it not just a hypothesis? Did I not just describe the scientific method,
Right.
right? And the plan is your hypothesis. Now, if you if you are an expert in marketing, your hypothesis is going to be a lot better than someone who maybe isn't. But it's never going to be 100% because you have to start implementing and testing. And this is something no one wants to hear, and that takes time, right? I've had people say, I'm afraid to start this marketing thing right now because we have so much work in the next month. If we had an avalanche of work next week, like, you know, you should be thinking in terms of quarters and 6 months from now, and
Right.
that's if everything goes smoothly and you have a good sales team who can close a deal. What if you get really? Let's end with this. I'm gonna go to final thoughts
Good.
because I'm just rambling at this point, which I love to do. So part of our technical difficulties is all my little buttons moved around.
Uh-oh.
So I don't know where it is. So stand by. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts.
Oof. Very important to get that graphic in there. Final thoughts. My gosh. I think it's easy to get disoriented when you're close to your business. I'll share the rest of mine after you go. I feel like
The
I
only final thought,
dominated the podcast. Don't want to do that.
the only the only final thoughts I have is, again, I'm going back to the marketing plan. I think if you do good research, the marketing plan writes itself. I mean, to me, it really does. The information is there, and it makes your life so much easier. I think without it, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. It's going to be a challenge. So those are my 2 cents.
Sometimes it's a question of how much risk are you willing to bear, right? Are you a
Exactly.
risk taker or are you somebody that wants to lower your risk? And that's really
Yeah.
what your marketing plan should do. That's what marketing research is about. The whole thing is about lowering the operational risk of going to market. Confirmation bias leads to poor decision making, and I think it's a problem for everyone. And when it comes to sales and marketing or any other part of the business, we talked about that a little bit, a disciplined decision making process based on up to date, real world data, plus your internal, say, institutionalized data, almost always results in meeting realistic objectives. And I'm embarrassed to say, I don't remember who said this. You could maybe remind me. Plan the work, work the plan. Somebody really smart said that.
I don't remember.
I think it was Peter Drucker. All right.
Yeah, it probably was.
So argue with him. All right.
Let's go with that.
You know, you don't believe me? There's this guy named Peter Drucker. He's old guy, older than us.
He's an oldie but goodie, though. He had a lot of great insight.
You know, but Drucker, he didn't talk a lot about external data, which I always thought was kind of fascinating. He was really all about getting data from the organization. But if you start thinking about this confirmation bias, you really need that external data. And you don't have to spend a ton of money on it. But you just need, I wish there was a way around all of that, right? It's tedious. It takes discipline. Is there anything in business that's not hard that you know of? Getting sued, that's pretty easy. I think everything is hard in business. Marketing is not something that just happens. It's not. You're not going to come up with your best marketing ideas over a foosball table.
You might come up with a creative idea, but you'd still want to test it. So.
That's just because you've been smoking weed out the back before the foosball game. But really, your entire business works this way. Your marketing should work this way. Your sales should work this way. Disciplined planning process. And whatever plan you end up with is better than no plan at all. And I think that's, it was a wild and crazy rambling episode today, but I hope people got some value from it.
I know I did.
Did you?
Oh, yeah. I had a good time.
Hey, listen, if you're curious about the stuff we're talking about, see, we can't really get... I think this is our challenge. It's a short show, people. We even ran long today, but, we're trying to cover a lot of ground for you. We want it to be a good, rich experience, get good information out of it. If you want more information, you can definitely find us very easily. Shoot us a message. And I want to thank our producer, Enzo, for making this thing happen all over the country. And Heidi Designs, that takes care of all of our visuals and all of our promotion and all that sort of thing. And my amazing, ridiculous band for the music that we enjoy every week on the both front and back of the show. We don't need no stock music around here.
That's great.
Have a great week, Bill. And we'll see everybody else next week.
You've been listening to the B2B Marketing Mindset with Pete Monfre and Bill Lowell. Add to the conversation by commenting, sharing, and liking. And don't forget to subscribe and check out the links in the comments. Learn more at b2bmarketingmindset.com.